It begins with a moment so small that no one realizes the world has already changed. A man stands at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to turn green, distracted by a message on his phone. He steps forward too early, just as a car rushes through the intersection. There is no time to react, no time to think, no time to move. And then, something happens. The world freezes. Not slowly, not gently, but completely. The sound of the city cuts off as if someone has muted reality itself. The car stops inches from his body, suspended in space. A drop of water hangs in the air beside him, caught between falling and landing. Even the wind seems to vanish, leaving behind a silence so deep it feels unnatural. For a brief second, he does not understand what he is seeing. His heart is still racing, his breath still caught in his chest, but everything around him has stopped, except him. He looks around, confused, terrified, trying to understand if this is a dream, if he has died, if something has broken inside his mind. But everything feels real, too real. And then instinct takes over. He steps back, carefully, slowly, his movements the only thing that still exists in a world that has paused. He watches the frozen car, the driver locked in place, eyes focused forward, unaware that time itself has been interrupted. He moves out of the way, and just as suddenly as it began, everything returns. Sound crashes back into existence. The car speeds past, missing him completely, the driver unaware of how close he came to ending a life. The water drop hits the ground. The city continues, unchanged, as if nothing had happened. But something has, because the man knows what he felt. He knows what he saw, and he knows one thing for certain. Time stopped. At first, he keeps it to himself. There is no way to explain something like that without sounding insane. He tries to rationalize it, to find some explanation that fits inside the rules of the world he understands. Stress, adrenaline, a hallucination caused by fear. But then it happens again. Later that day, in a quieter moment, he focuses. Not intentionally, not with a clear idea of what he is doing, but with a strange, almost subconscious pull toward that same feeling. And the world freezes again. This time he is ready. He looks at his watch. The second hand is still. Everything is still. And he begins to count. 1, 2, 3. By the time he reaches 10, time resumes. Exactly 10 seconds. No more, no less. That is when fear turns into something else. Curiosity, because if it can happen once, and then again, then it is not an accident. It is ability. Within hours, others begin to notice. A woman avoids a falling object that should have hit her. A child reaches for something across a room too quickly for anyone to understand how. A driver corrects a fatal mistake at the last possible moment, as if given time that should not exist. At first, these moments seem isolated, lucky, unexplainable. But then the pattern becomes clear. People begin to talk, quietly at first, then louder, then everywhere. Something is happening. Everyone has felt it. That same pause, that same silence, those same 10 seconds. And suddenly, the world is forced to accept something impossible. Every human being now has the power to stop time. For 10 seconds. No one knows why. No one understands how. But it is real. And like every new power humanity has ever gained, the first reaction is not fear. It is experimentation. People test it in small ways. They use it to avoid mistakes, to correct accidents, to reach things just out of reach. It feels harmless at first, almost like a hidden advantage, a quiet safety net woven into reality itself. Students use it during exams, stealing answers from frozen classrooms. Athletes use it in competition, adjusting their movements with impossible precision. Workers use it to finish tasks faster, to fix errors before anyone notices. First, it feels like a gift, a small one, limited, controlled. But it does not stay that way, because once people realize that everyone has the same ability, something begins to change. Trust starts to weaken because every interaction now carries a question. What happened in those 10 seconds I could not see? Security systems fail almost immediately. Cameras freeze along with everything else, unable to record what happens inside the pause. Locks, alarms, digital protections, all become unreliable in a world where time itself can be bypassed. Crime evolves faster than anyone expected. Not louder, not more chaotic, but quieter, more precise. A theft that happens without movement. An object that disappears without explanation. A door that opens without being touched. Because it was touched, just not in time anyone else could see. Law enforcement struggles to respond. Evidence becomes unreliable. Events no longer unfold in a continuous way. There are gaps now, invisible moments where anything could have happened. And no one can prove it, because everyone has access to the same silence, the same 10 seconds. And that is when the real consequences begin to emerge. Not from what people can do, but from what they begin to realize. If everyone can stop time, then no one is ever truly observed. No one is ever fully accountable. Reality itself develops blind spots. And inside those blind spots, human nature begins to show itself in ways that were always there, but never this easy to act on. Some people use it responsibly, carefully, as if aware of the fragile balance they are part of. They treat it like a second chance, a way to avoid harm, to correct mistakes, to protect themselves and others. But others, they begin to see it differently, not as a tool, but as an opportunity. Because 10 seconds in the right moment can change everything. A decision, a result, a life. And as the days pass, as more people experiment, as more boundaries are pushed, one unsettling truth begins to spread across the world. 10 seconds is not as small as it seems. It is enough to change outcomes, enough to rewrite moments, enough to alter reality in ways no one fully understands yet. And the more it is used, the less stable everything begins to feel, because the world was never designed to be paused. And now it is happening millions of times a day, everywhere, all at once, creating fractures in something people cannot see, but are starting to feel. A strange sense that reality is no longer flowing the way it used to, that moments are no longer fully connected, that something deep beneath the surface is beginning to break. And no one knows what will happen when it finally does. At first, the world tries to adjust. There is a belief, almost comforting in its simplicity, that this is just another change humanity will learn to live with, another strange ability that will eventually become ordinary, predictable, controlled. Governments gather experts, scientists, and strategists, trying to understand how to regulate something that exists inside every human being. But the problem reveals itself quickly. You cannot regulate 10 seconds that leave no trace. You cannot monitor something that erases its own evidence. You cannot control a moment that exists outside of time itself. And so the world begins to shift in ways no one anticipated. Not suddenly, not violently, but quietly, deeply, and permanently. The first major change happens in competition. Sports, once built on skill, training, and physical limits, begin to lose their meaning. Records are broken in ways that feel unnatural, movements become too precise, too perfect, too calculated. At first, officials try to enforce rules, banning the use of time pauses, introducing new technologies, stricter observation. But it is impossible to prove, because from the outside, nothing ever happens. And eventually, audiences begin to notice something is wrong. Victories feel hollow, performances feel artificial, and slowly, interest fades. The idea of fair competition dissolves, replaced by a quiet understanding that every result is influenced by something invisible. Then it spreads to something far more important: decision-making, because 10 seconds is not just about action. It is about thinking. People begin to realize that they can pause time not only to move, but to consider. Every argument, every negotiation, every critical moment becomes different. Conversations lose their natural rhythm because behind every response, there may have been 10 seconds of silent preparation. You ask a question, the other person answers immediately, but in reality, they had time to think, to calculate, to choose the perfect response. Creates a world where spontaneity disappears, where nothing is truly immediate, where every reaction may have been carefully constructed in a space you could never access. Trust begins to erode even further, because now it is not just actions that are hidden, it is thoughts. And slowly, people begin to feel something unsettling, that they are no longer interacting with reality as it is, but with something edited. The psychological effects deepen. Some people become addicted to the pause, not because of what they can do with it, but because of what it feels like. Inside those 10 seconds, there is silence, complete and absolute. No noise, no movement, no pressure, just stillness, control. For individuals overwhelmed by the speed of life, those 10 seconds become a refuge. They begin to use it more and more, not out of necessity, but out of habit. A moment to escape, to breathe, to exist in a world where nothing moves unless they choose it to. But the more they rely on it, the harder it becomes to return. Because real time feels different now. Faster, harsher, unforgiving. And for some, the gap between those two states becomes unbearable. Anxiety increases across populations. Not the loud, visible kind, but a quiet, persistent tension, as if people are constantly aware that reality is no longer stable. That at any moment, someone near them could step outside of time, act without consequence, and return as if nothing happened. Creates a new kind of loneliness, not physical, but existential, because even when you are surrounded by others, you cannot be sure you are sharing the same moment. At the same time, something else begins to emerge. Patterns, small at first, almost impossible to detect, but consistent. Scientists begin to notice irregularities in systems that should be perfectly stable. Clocks that drift by fractions of a second. Data that does not align. Processes that seem to skip tiny intervals without explanation. At first, these are dismissed as technical errors, but they grow and they spread. Because every time time is paused, even for 10 seconds, it is not just stopping for one person. It is stopping for the entire world. And when that happens millions of times a day, something begins to accumulate. Not visibly, not dramatically, but structurally. Reality begins to fragment. The effects are subtle but undeniable. Conversations feel slightly out of sync. Events do not flow as smoothly as they once did. There are moments where people feel a strange sense of discontinuity, as if something has been skipped, something important has happened just outside their awareness. And they are right, because it has. Entire segments of existence now occur in a space no one else can perceive. A hidden layer of reality, overlapping the visible one, growing larger with every use. And then something changes, not in people, but in the pauses themselves. At first, it is barely noticeable. Someone counts 10 seconds, but time resumes a fraction too early. Another person experiences a pause that feels slightly longer than it should. These differences are small, easy to dismiss, but they become more frequent, more unpredictable, more unstable. The 10 seconds are no longer exact. And that is when fear truly begins. Because until now, the ability felt controlled, limited, safe. But if those limits begin to shift, then what exactly is happening to time itself? Scientists race to understand it, but the problem is impossible to isolate. Every experiment is affected by the same variable. Every observation is incomplete, interrupted by unseen pauses that alter results in ways that cannot be measured. It becomes clear that this is not just a human ability. It is a global disruption, something that is changing the fundamental structure of reality. And no one knows how far it will go, People begin to hesitate before using it. What once felt like a harmless advantage now carries uncertainty. Each pause feels slightly different, slightly less predictable, as if the system itself is under strain, as if time is resisting, and in rare, deeply unsettling moments, something even stranger is reported. People claim that during the pause, they are not alone. At first, these stories are dismissed as imagination, as the result of stress, fear, or overuse. But the descriptions are too similar to ignore. A sense of presence, a feeling that something is observing, existing within the same frozen moment, aware in a way that should not be possible. Watching, waiting. No one can confirm it, no one can prove it, but the idea spreads. And once it does, the silence inside those 10 seconds is no longer comforting. It becomes something else, something heavy, something alive. And as the world continues to fracture under the weight of millions of interruptions, as time itself becomes less stable, less reliable, one final realization begins to settle in. Humanity was never meant to control time, not even for 10 seconds, because time is not just a resource, it is a structure, a foundation, and by stepping outside of it, even briefly, people have begun to weaken something they cannot see, but cannot survive without. And if it breaks completely, there will be no time left to fix it.